Hi, today we are going to take a look at a new feature that has just landed in the Solid Application Interoperability drafts and SAI.js sample implementation. This new feature is a role-based access controls. So let's dive right in. Some of you may be familiar with group-based access control in WAC, where WAC stands for Web Access Control, not WebAssembly Composition. So in WAC, the group-based access control allows to grant access to a group of agents, but in practice it only works if the listing of that group, so the list of members, is public. Otherwise, the server that tries to enforce that access control policy may not be able to get the list of agents, and then the agents in this group will not be able to grant access. For example, in Community Solid server, even if the listing of group is on the same server but it's access protected, the server will try to make a request and it will the access will be rejected, and you still will not be able to use that policy. So again, in practice with WAC as of today, if the list of group members is not public, you cannot really take advantage of that. And also, as you will see later, SAI has an additional way of using roles, where actually use role to define whose data the grantee of access can access. So it's not who will be accessing the data, but who's the data owner or resource owner in OAuth. So without more discussing it, let's get into example right away. We have two browser windows. In the first one, we will log in as Bob. You can see here some peers in the Bob's network, and we can see here a few roles that are defined by Bob. And in the other window, we will log in as Dan. So now we can see Dan and Bob have pre-established relation. You can see the video on invitations to see how you can establish relation with a social peer. And Dan doesn't have any other access, doesn't even have access to Bob's data. They have relation, but no access at this moment. If we look at Bob, there are two roles. We'll use the with role, and we will grant some access to that role. For now, there is no access need generation tool, so I will just reuse an access of one of the applications that Bob is using, the access need group. So you may be familiar with that from the video showing authorization screen. So here we ask for access of projects and tasks, and again, the role with will be a grantee here. And for example, let's only grant access to everything from Acme. So the scope here will be all from agent, the agent will be Acme. So we can authorize this role. So now the role with has access, and we can see here quickly that Bob has access to projects on two different storages owned by Acme. And here we can reload, and at this moment, as you see, Dan still has no access because there's no members in the with role. So what happens now, when we edit the role and add Dan, we save it. I need to add an indication showing that it's processing. So now, once this one is done, now Dan is in the role. And also here I need to connect notifications to automatically reload, but if you reload manually for now, you can see now Dan can see Acme. And before, Dan didn't even know that Acme existed, possibly, but now this relation is through Bob. Also, this could be an indication here to show that Dan has data sharing regulation with Acme via Bob. If we look here, we'll see something very similar, that now what Bob had access to, Dan has access to, because Bob delegated that, and Bob delegated that based on the fact that Dan is in a with role. So if we go back here, and now we'll do something different. Now we'll take a with role, and we will completely delete it. We need to confirm here. We are deleting the role. So also the authorization that was created for that role was revoked, and all the grants based on that were revoked. So if we look here, again, Dan doesn't have any more access to Acme data because it was revoked by, in this case, Bob simply deleting that role. So if there were more members in that role, all their access that was delegated would have been as well revoked. So the next example we will see, let's sign out here. And again, you could accomplish something similar with WAC as long, again, as the role is public. It's publicly available, the list of members. Now we will go to Alice, and we will go to Kim. So let's log in as Alice, let's log in as Kim. Alice has few more roles defined. And again, there's a relation. At this moment, there's no access to any of data of Alice. And Bob doesn't matter, it's just invitation, as you see. As I mentioned, there's invitation flow that you can pass a link to invite someone, but it doesn't matter for this demo. So now we will do something that you cannot really do with something like web access control. We'll take a role, folks, again, we grant authorization, as in the previous example. But here, what we will do, instead of granting, so here we select which data we authorize access to. But now we will use role as a list of which agents are the resource or data owners that now this role folks will have access to. So let's select corpse. We create the authorization. Okay, so now we have Acme in corpse and no one in folks at this moment. And again, Kim cannot access any data of Acme, spoiler. If we again edit the role and add Kim to the role, which again was the grantee of access authorization, we save it. And now, if we reload here, we can again confirm that the data that Alice had access to, and again, if you observe, you can notice that Alice has a little less access to Acme's data because Bob has more data shared from Acme, but Alice has less, and Kim would have exactly the same data delegated to her. There you go. Even that there are tasks, it's not having access because it was just selected tasks, but Alice doesn't have access to tasks, so it's a little UI back over here. At this moment, we can see that Kim has this access. Again, Kim doesn't have direct relationship with Acme because she has it through Alice, and UI could indicate it a little bit better. So if we go now to the role management, and now for the difference, what we will do, so what we will do, Kim will still stay in a false role. What we will do, we will remove Acme from the role that is the scope of which data the access was granted to. So now Acme is no more in a corpse. The authorization is still assigned for this role, but as you see, again, Kim doesn't have any more access to Acme's data because Acme is no more in this role. Even that Kim is still in the folks, Acme is no more here, so this authorization, it's not encompassing Acme's data. So as you see, it's very flexible, and here on the right, if you look at the authorization agent primer, you can see a little bit of a kind of information if you use it as a grantee or you use it as a data owner, like which grants are being generated and which access is being granted to who. And in this example here, when we have a corpse and folks, as you can see here, the access was pretty much a Cartesian product of all the members of folks get access to all the data from all the members of corpse. And again, that's not something that one could do with something like web access control. And yeah, I would invite you to take a look, check out the SAI.js repo. Probably it's easiest to run it locally to experiment with it. And what's also very important, those roles are just internal to the agent who defines them. So in that case, where we can add again, we can add Acme here. So in this setup, since the role is internal to the person or organization who's defining them, when those grants are generated, they do not leak the information about the roles. So for example, Kim doesn't know that she's in this kind of folks role. Acme doesn't know that it's in this kind of corpse role. The role-based authorizations, as all authorizations, are internal, and then the grants that are generated based on them are exposed to corresponding peers. So only the corresponding peers for each grant know about it. And again, if there are more members in the role, not only they don't know that they are in the role, they don't know that they are in the same role with other members. So it's a little more privacy preserving and allows people to manage things internally without exposing it to the outside. So once again, thank you for paying attention. And if you are curious about more functionality for organizations, sometimes in September I will release a video showing about the new features that are coming for organizations. So far, as you see, I'm logging as individuals, but in the future I will log in as an admin of Acme or admin of Yo-Yo and show how you can actually manage organizations using SAI and SAI.js. Have a good day. Bye.